Aloha, it's Christine Pensa, and this is the Awakened Woman Self Care Podcast, episode 114. And we're going to be continuing the discussion around story because it's such a rich topic. It's really fascinating that when you know that old saying, when you buy a white car, everybody in the world is driving a white car. Well, the same thing has risen up for me around story. And so I knew that I was just dipping in last week to this idea of story and how we're running stories in our lives, and all the stories that are actually collapsing right now. And yet I thought I was complete with the discussion last week. But there's so much has come up, and I've had so many beautiful and rich discussions around story with people this week, and so I felt there was more to share that would be helpful with respect to our sacred self-care in this moment. And in particular, what came forward was this conversation that I had with a number of people was boiled down to its essence, which is that as we're being just really pulled by the external world and things are coming to a head out there, so we don't even need to go into all the ways that that is manifesting, but we're being pulled more and more into this survival mode and pulled away from ourselves. And this storyline that we're being pulled into, this kind of survival mode, or the us against them and the right and wrong, leads us to believe that there's such a limitation of options, and maybe even just one option. Like we have to choose a story, a side. And so it's really interesting to me that, and I read this somewhere this week, that when we're in survival mode, we actually, as human beings, naturally shut down our creativity and our imagination. And we go into that fight or flight for sure, and that can be helpful in a lot of situations, but probably not in this moment. What we need in this moment are those creative solutions, are the creator beings who are opening up to the fields of infinite possibility. And as I said at the beginning of this season 3, this is really going to be a space for the pioneers of the new consciousness, those that are helping us step across this divide, across this survival mode story, and move into the new. And it was really interesting because yesterday I was listening to a discussion from one of my divine teachers, and and her friend, and it was a discussion around the word value. And I thought about how, there's so many ways that that word is playing out right now. Um, and, we've on the let's quote, positive side, or the kind of, um, higher vibration, higher frequency side of that, we have had this time where we've been locked down and been able to really tune in to what is really of value to us. What do we value? And it's been, we have a lot of us um, let go of a lot of things that we thought we valued. And we've tuned in more to a simpler lifestyle. We have been able to spend more time with family, whether that's a good or bad thing from your perspective. But we have really been fine tuning. What is it that I want in my life? What is it that I value? And so for a lot of that's been this beautiful journey. And then there's this other aspect of value, and that's where we value one thing over another, or where we put it into this space of judgment. And we look at, ourselves as not being valuable. We look at, other people outside things, and we've been, let's say, indoctrinated or taught to value the opinions of somebody else who is a quote expert or etc. Could be someone who was our parent or teacher, and so takes us away from the what we can tune into in our own selves and value in our own perspective. And so, what my beautiful teacher said was that the word value, um, and many other words like it, are won't have a meaning as we move into new consciousness. And so, what I took from that was that these words were constructs of this lower density, where we have been um, pulled into this survival mode story. It's good, it's bad, they're right or wrong. There's two sides only. Instead of that, there's one well, there's one perspective which contains an infinity of possibilities and solutions. And so we won't need a lot of these stories and constructs as we move into the new consciousness. And that there is no need to store. And so that, for me, just let me say that again, because that opened me up a lot when I heard that. There is no need to store. So stories have been a storage space for consciousness. And so we have been storing these stories in our lower consciousness, because that's how we made sense of this world. That's how we moved through it. And that's how, we knew, okay, yes, that person told me that. And they're in a position of authority, so it must be right. So I store that information, that story stays in my body. And last night, as I have been, and I know a lot of you have been, I got woken up in the middle of the night with some information, higher self information, in my waking state. I know a lot is happening for dream time. And yeah, we're going to go into that too, because that's a fascinating, I'm going to have some guests to talk about that too. But as we get actually physically woken up in the middle of the night, and this information, we're in that beautiful receptive space of the liminal space. And so this information comes in, and this was something I went, oh my goodness, that's a great thing, metaphor that to share that will really help a lot of people. And so here's my little story of metaphor that I was shown last night. And so um, sometimes this idea of something that we have, this story that we've had in place for a long time, can feel so solid. And of course, we know that, on one hand, we know things are not solid here. We know that we're energy. And yet, there's a huge piece of us, hands up me, that does not believe that necessarily, or doesn't know how to make sense of it. And so, my lovely higher self knows that about me, and so showed me this image. And what it was this brick uh, sort of held in front of me. And so the brick was uh, something that I had found, that I was running, a story that I was running. And uh, I can share it here. So the story was that my dad used to always say, "Oh, they're so accomplished." And what, because of how that brick was held in place, it was held in place by this mortar, and I saw that mortar around it as well. So it was held in place by um, the mortar of fear, of unworthiness, of, oh, accomplishment is something that is outside of me. Um, and that's certainly something that has run in my family. So, whew, um, here I am, bearing it for you. Um, and so I saw that, I kept trying to like poke at this brick of, I knew that was a false story and a false narrative, and it wasn't serving me, and it was diminishing me. But what I was shown was, look at what the brick is, yes, but also look at how it's held in place, and how you've agreed to also have that mortar holding that story in place in your own field and space. And so I was shown that it wasn't just about like saying no to the brick, it was dissolving and melting and releasing the mortar that holds it in place. And so I know those programs and patterns of the fear of not being good enough, the fear comparison of others and putting others on a pedestal. That's programming that just, and stories that run in our field so strongly. Like when we hear a hero's journey, do you see yourself as the hero? Or do you see that this is a chosen one and not for you? And so notice the stories, notice every story that comes into your field, something that somebody is repeating or parroting because they've heard it from the external world, and they tell you that there's only one option. And allow yourself to see what that is for you. Is this a story I want to put mortar around? Am I going to spackle that in to my being with this mortar? Or am I going to pull back? And am I going to come within and move into my creator, my creativity, my imagination as a powerful healing tool for myself? So that will help me notice and release the old stories that are separating me, you, from our divine truth, and then open us up to living as this higher frequency, higher light, higher order, higher vibration creator being. And how can we do that? In addition to noticing, how can we do that? How do we support ourselves through this beautiful wave that we're moving through? And focus on the knowing that is inside you and choosing to step in to yourself, to your sovereignty, to your own freedom, to choose the story for you and the story that you want to move into and birth. So support yourself and your sacred self-care. Number one thing I think that helps to reset and allow you to open to more of what is coming through is silence. Just going in. And as always, being in silence with nature is like, whew, puts it on steroids, right? Being with nature as much as you can, turning your face to the sun and just like allowing that beauty to come in to your space. Allow the wind to speak to you. Stand against a tree in the physical, and if you can't do it in the physical, imagine yourself. Bring your imagination and creativity to bear. Feel your feet on moss or ground or sand or stone, whatever feels good, and hunker down into that knowing of you. Breath work is another beautiful way. When you tune into the breath and the rhythm of your breath, you naturally come back in to the sacred space of you. And that is powerful self-care. So when you get hit with this external story and somebody telling you something, even if it's a friend where you feel like, oh, and you are triggered, or your survival gets amplified, just in that moment, you don't have to respond. We always think we have to respond immediately. No, just take a moment and say, okay, I need a moment, and breathe. Tune into your breath. Taking a few breaths is powerful reset. And of course, stay away from the external stories as much as you can, and to your own level of knowing when you can look at something and when it's not the time, because you need to take care of yourself. And as you do all of these things, you're going to tune into more and more and more of this internal story of you, of the truth of you, and what is coming up. I love this time of year because it's just naturally here in the Northern Hemisphere that we're in this dark. I feel it's so juicy for me, this dark, silent, velvety place and space inside you. So take time to be there. Notice where you're on autopilot in any moment of the day and just self-correct. You're the navigator of this beautiful vessel that is you. Allow yourself to come back into your own body, to experience your peace and your knowing of this wave of new consciousness that is coming in. And so beginning to open up, to listen for the new story, which is always expansive and not contracting, and shaking loose the old as much as you can, with as much gentleness and love, self-love as you can. And keep asking yourself, what is the highest order story that I can move in to creating now? What is my highest truth now as a creator being? And choose it, know it, command that it is so, as your own sovereign expression of pure source. And let's get rid of all these bricks and all the mortar holding it in place, because we are here building something new, and that new does not need bricks and mortar. It is constantly expanding. It is providing joy and creativity, and comes from a place of our own sacred self-care and self-love, with harm to none. And so I thank you for being here once again, and I thank you for all the powerful work you are doing to bring this into reality. I love you, and I will see you next time.